Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle book review of Marvel's Eye of the Camera. Now this is by, well, it's best to actually say, instead of saying it, there's all the various names. This book is 160 pages, it's in colour all the way through. It's the sequel to Marvel's, and the book came out in 2019. There is a hardback edition. I think the hardback edition is probably out of print because I noticed that the price was insanely expensive online, so I'm assuming that it's gone out of print. However, this includes Marvel's Eye of the Camera 1 to 6. I didn't buy at the time the stories either, so nor did I buy this. I only just bought this, just read it, and well, is it as good as the first? No, nothing could be as good as the first. The first is up there for me in the top 10 all-time comics. I love Marvel's, and I've had it in a number of different forms. Obviously, the big form, the small form, the standard form, the comic, and this one. Well, I waited to get this one, so. But however, I still did enjoy it. There's a few criticisms. The first one being, why Thor on the front cover? Since if you come into this, mainly Phil Sheldon, why not put him on the cover? Obviously, it's not going to probably sell as much because, of course, it's not going to be as dramatic. But why not Spidey? Spidey is more central to this story. I love these mentions of Weasley Parker. He really hates Parker all the way through this book. This sort of hatred of Parker, which is quite sad, really, because obviously. However, you've got the Fantastic Four, of course, mentioned quite a few occasional reference to Punisher. You've also got the X-Men, and the real story is probably the X-Men, Mutant Menace. You've got the X Factor, which is slightly odd. Don't know why the X Factor turns up, because I thought that was more into the 80s and 90s. But however, that's what's in here. So there's the Marvels, and of course you can see there. You can see the general thrust of the story. You've got the Punisher, and it's the dark side. And there's quite a few references to the dark side, not the Star Wars version, but the dark side of Marvel. And maybe that he should do a sequel himself. With all these photos, he's got these millions of photos, taken thousands of photos, and he wonders if it's worth it. Was it worth all these photographs? And of course, there's a lot of great moments where he realises, well, obviously, you know what is going to happen. It's not exactly a surprise. But it's still, well, there is some surprises as well. I'm not going to say anything more of that, but there are lots of twists and turns, and which is the thing. But obviously, the general thrust of the storyline, you're familiar with if you know anything of the 70s history of Marvel and 80s, because it certainly stretches a bit into that as well. And it does have going along the various issues that are included. So you've got Pearson. Now, I'm not so keen on the artwork, I have to say that for a start. I mean, it's fine, but it's not. And there's some big clues all over this and for what the story's going to be about. And you got him. Now, I found the first couple of the story slightly a bit unusual. It was, I wasn't really certain what period it was supposed to be covering, if it was a bit of a flashback or because it just seemed to be referencing this bit. So it's got sort of mentions here of the Fantastic Four. Now, that clearly is the Fantastic Four #1. So why is that? It's not really the 70s. So there was a bit in the story felt more a sort of recap of the previous one, which is slightly odd. I just don't know why they just didn't start with the 70s. Why not go straight into the stories around, I don't know, some of the classic Hulk issues from about 120, 130 issues. Ones I loved. I love those Hulk stories. So I would love to have seen them. And that's the thing. Quite a lot of it is, that's about the only time I can remember seeing Thor. And yet he's on the front cover and the back. Very strange. Yeah, what you've got here, obviously, you've got this lovely one with Cyclops there. We blast in there. Scott Summers there. And you've got the scary, as I said, sort of the thing there, looking there. And you've got Spider-Man, Threat or Menace. And all those sort of references back to things. So it's slightly confusing. Also, when you look at some of the art, some of the, really near enough, sometimes I looked at it, I thought, it feels more like the 1930s at times. Some of the characters in here, but again, that's always the way, I suppose. The fashions of some people were never the swinging 60s, whatever fashions you imagine. Then you've got obviously, I want a comic. I was always doing that, so that's probably me saying, I want a comic. I'm the Thing. I think probably said that a few times as well. There's Ant-Man. So you got, Ant-Man, of course. Well, I suppose Ant-Man did come back a bit into later 60s and 70s. You had the Ant-Man stories, so Marvel feature, etc. And you got lots and lots. What's this? Oh, you got Oh, Return of Captain America, the Fantastic Four wedding. So the story was took a bit of time to initially start, and then once it gets going quite well. And I must admit, I'm not going to show this bit because that's going to be too much of the thing. However, he's out in the rain, and what happens? He's just going to get mugged. Well, of course, you know what's going to happen. Well, in fact, it's virtually inevitable that it was going to happen. And I'm not going to say it, what happens, but you can guess. In America, New York, it's in the rain, and it's in Marvel Universe. You also got the Punisher there. So you got the Punisher. Now, Punisher doesn't particularly get vast amounts mentioned, but there's this sort of dark side of it. And his publisher keeps turning around to him and saying, I would like you to produce a dark side of Marvel, sort of the evil characters. Though, of course, the Punisher isn't particularly evil. Though, I mean, it's useful in the time, certainly in a situation where you want to survive, he's probably going to be very useful. So in the sense that he's not, but he's certainly a character that's a bit sort of the vigilante character. Of course, you could always argue all of these characters, in a sense, are vigilante. Spidey, Daredevil, all of them, in a sense, are that. They're off doing something that who actually gave them the rights to do it, other than they've got some powers and they can do it. That's about the only thing. They're sort of like always on that edge of the thing. And of course, that's what Jameson is always going on about, whether they're a menace or not. You've got alien abduct heroes in Central Park storyline. And you've got some lovely sort of mentions of his friends and whatever. They turn up. And there's also a lovely scene where he goes to the bar and he's with his friends. And there's certain scenes there that are quite good. Also, you've got Yellow Jacket there, of course. And also you've got all the characters who, obviously, the Monster Squad. There's also references to the werewolves, Dracula and those sort of things. Because, of course, you had those black and white magazines at the time. Obviously, those sort of horror characters were kicking in at that point. Though I must admit, I'm not certain why they didn't also mention, well, they did actually. I suppose you've got Iron Fist gets a mention as well. Also, I think, I love this bit. This was a great bit. There was a lovely bit with the X-Men where there's a scene where one of the characters turns around and says, don't you remember what happened? Sort of thing. There's a reason, I'm not going to spoil it for what's said, but I just think, don't you remember? And I just love the reasons why as well when he's turned around and says that. I'm just thinking that's good. My mate always turns around and says that. He always turns around and says, because quite often in science fiction films, there's certain character that's always got this thing that always somehow is the one that saves the planet. So it's always... And also there's other characters. Sometimes there's characters in here I'm thinking, there's that black cat. Looks like Black Cat. Is that Black Cat? I don't know. And again, I thought the Black Cat was a lot later than the 70s. So I'm really sort of backwards and forwards in terms of the story. You've got the Kingpin, you've got obviously Elektra. You've got the... but again, hardly any mention. Oh, you've got obviously the Hulk there, She-Hulk, and Iron Man briefly. You've got Molecule Man as well. And you've got the Beyonder story. All those sort of things, which I'm certain was a bit later than the 70s. So I'm not really certain the timeline with this. You've got the Hulk there as well. Anyway, it's just full of just great stories. And you, of course, got Havoc, and you've got other characters. You've got Storm mentioned there. So, I don't know. What a brilliant book. It is a brilliant book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really, like I said, the first bit of it, I wasn't sure. I was thinking the first... And I think that's probably why I didn't continue to buy it when it came out the first time, because I got the first issue and I sort of... But actually reading this now, it was a lot better. I love that one with the, of course, lovely photo there of Giant Man and the Wasp as well. And of course, the classic one was Giant Man's walking across the high up across the thing. That's always been the trouble for me with Giant Man, the size that he is. You're never really sure what size is. Is he really massive or is he it's only about 12 foot? I know 12 foot would be pretty big, but he's not massively big. I mean, it'd be big if someone was standing over you, look 12 foot, but he's not huge. Only twice your height. You got, what's that one? Oh, that's Beyond the Story. But there's some lovely things. And there was a tear in the eye by the end, which is something that I didn't have with the first one. First Marvels, it was good. It was lovely. It was a touching story, brilliant. But this actually made me sort of have a bit of a weep. Just thought, what a touching story all the way through. It was really a pleasure to read in the end, but not as good as the Marvels one. That's unfortunately. However, extras. Well, the extra, I'm not going to show that because that would ruin the story. And it's got some things here. So you've got a long list of all the various issues. So you've got like the Dazzler, the movie, Amazing Spider-Man 253, X-Men 14. So you can see it goes back in time a bit. You've got Sentinels attacking Manhattan on page 18. Sort of all over the place in terms of the numbering here. You've got Galactus restores Manhattan. Fantastic 4243. See, why is that mentioned? That must be in the 80s. Fantastic 423. Easily. So I'm not really certain the timeline, I guess. That was one draw. However, you've got the outlines at the back. You've got two outlines. Because things were changed. Obviously, you had this sort of... And also, of course, there was the epilogue issue, which doesn't feature in this at all. The Marvel's epilogue one. That was quite good, actually. It was a separate comic. I don't know if it's been combined into any of the collections yet. But that was good. And also you've got here, so you've got two outlines. And they're quite enjoyable to read, actually. I always love outlines. I always wish that they put that in many comics, because you just read it. It's interesting to see what the ideas that sometimes didn't get into the final comic. Because you think, oh, that was slightly different. And also the reasoning behind it. You think, I wonder why they changed things. And I quite like that. I always think, well, I can understand it sometimes. And then sometimes you think, well, why did they do that? And you think, that's just plain ridiculous. Doesn't make sense. However, the art process, you've also got the lovely art process, and you've got some pencil sketches. You haven't got much, but you've got the outlines. And I think, personally, the outlines are fine. I love those sort of things. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. And also there's a bit reference here to the Marvel posters featuring the art of Alex Ross, which I haven't got, I must admit. Didn't buy that one. Didn't really do much for me. However, there is a poster book of Alex Ross's artwork coming out very soon, and I will definitely be buying that because that looks excellent. So, well, did I enjoy it? Yes. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Very enjoyable story, even if it's pretty weird that the Thor's on the front cover. But was it as good as Marvel's? No. But it's more a Phil Sheldon story and mutants, sort of Marvel, Spider-Man, than anything else. But still, very much recommended.